The rain started just after midnight, soft at first, then harder. It was that specific kind of heavy Pacific Northwest rain that just makes the windows shake and leaves the whole neighborhood feeling entirely empty. Inside, Emily Carter sat completely alone in the dim, flickering light of her Seattle kitchen. The silence in the house was heavy. I mean, it was suffocating. The only sound was that rhythmic pounding against the glass. You know that feeling when the house is too quiet and your mind just starts racing? That was Emily. Her perfectly constructed, beautiful life was about to violently shatter, and sitting there in the dark, she had absolutely no idea. Let's just dive right into exactly how a marriage unravels in the dark. It was 12:43 a.m. Her coffee had gone stone cold 2 hours ago. Again. Emily's body was just aching from this bone-deep, relentless exhaustion that, honestly, only a mother to a 6-month-old teething baby can truly understand. Every muscle felt heavy. And her husband, Daniel, he still wasn't home. Now, at first, she had believed every single excuse he fed her. We all want to trust the people we love, right? Late meeting, traffic downtown, client dinner, my phone died. She had heard them all. She sat there waiting in the pouring rain, just staring at the glowing green numbers on the microwave clock, desperately trying to silence this terrifying, gnawing gut feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The confusion was so paralyzing because the shift in his behavior was incredibly subtle. It didn't happen overnight. Think about the Daniel from a year ago. He used to text her constantly throughout the workday. He would always, without fail, kiss her forehead before grabbing his briefcase and leaving for work. But Daniel now, he barely even answered his phone. He would grab his keys without even looking in her direction. When he did come home, he claimed he was just too exhausted to even hold their baby daughter, Sophie. Emily kept desperately telling herself, it's just work stress, men change under pressure, right? Marriage isn't a movie, it gets hard. But deep down in her core, something inside her just absolutely refused to stay quiet. Suddenly, upstairs, 6-month-old Sophie began crying. Emily pulled herself up, rushed up the stairs to the nursery, and started rocking her baby near the window while the thunder echoed outside. But then, Emily noticed something strange. The baby monitor screen downstairs in the living room was still active, and the volume, it was turned up way louder than usual. At first, she just tried to ignore it. Just static, right? Then she completely froze. A sound came through that little plastic speaker. A woman, laughing. Emily's heartbeat slowed down. And then it just stopped entirely. She looked around the pitch-black nursery. There was no TV on, no phone playing a video. The laugh came through the speaker again. Soft, real. Someone was inside her house. Emily walked slowly toward the monitor on the dresser. Static flickered across the tiny screen. A female voice whispered, "Oh my God, what if she wakes up?" Emily's stomach dropped instantly to the floor. Every single hair on her arms stood straight up. And then, the absolute gut-wrenching punch echoed through that speaker. It was Daniel's voice. "She's upstairs with the baby. Relax." Emily couldn't breathe. Her brain literally refused to process what she was hearing. Daniel wasn't even home yet. At least, that's what his text from 4 hours ago had claimed. Then a glass clinked downstairs. Another laugh. This time louder, bolder, closer. They were inside her kitchen. Emily's hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped Sophie. She carefully placed her baby down in the crib, silently opened the nursery door, and started moving toward the staircase. With every step down, the voices became clearer. Daniel was laughing. He sounded comfortable, relaxed. Halfway down the stairs, she could see the warm light spilling out from the kitchen. And then she saw her, a blonde woman, barefoot on the hardwood floor. And the most chilling, sickening detail of all, this woman was wearing Emily's oversized gray hoodie, the exact same one Daniel had bought for Emily during their first anniversary trip to Chicago. She was just standing there in Emily's kitchen, drinking her wine, smiling like she lived there, and Daniel's hand was resting completely casually right on her waist. For a second, the entire world went dead silent. Then Daniel looked up. The color instantly drained from his face. The wine glass literally slipped from the blonde woman's hand and shattered into 100 pieces across the kitchen floor. "Baby, wait," Daniel started. "Don't," Emily whispered, her voice cut through the room like a jagged blade. Daniel nervously put his hands up, backing away, and offered the absolute most pathetic, classic excuse in the history of gaslighting. He said, "It's not what you think." Emily actually let out a broken laugh. "Really?" she whispered. "Then explain to me why another woman is wearing my clothes in my kitchen at 1 in the morning. When Daniel finally stammered out that it had been going on for a few months and actually tried to say it just happened, Emily looked him dead in the eye. "Cheating doesn't just happen. You made choices." Now, I want you to notice how quickly the psychology of a caught cheater shifts. Daniel didn't fall to his knees. He didn't cry. He didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, right before her eyes, he instantly morphed into this cold, calculating manipulator. He looked at Emily and told her she was being emotional. He actually called her insane for overreacting. He threw his hands up in frustration, actively making himself the victim in the situation. He even stepped in front of the blonde woman to defend her. And you know what the absolute darkest part of this entire scene is? Upstairs, little Sophie had started crying loudly again. It had been nearly 5 minutes, and Daniel never once even looked toward the stairs. The man who used to sprint up the steps at every tiny sound his daughter made, he didn't even react anymore. It was like his humanity was just gone. Emily pointed at the door and told him to get out. She grabbed his coat, his keys, and his heavy laptop bag and literally threw them at his chest. Daniel walked toward the front entryway, but then he stopped. He turned around, looked at the mother of his child, and delivered the most devastating, unfathomably cruel blow of the entire night. "You know," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth, "maybe if you weren't always tired, things would have been different." He actually weaponized her sacrifices against her. He watched this woman sacrifice her body, her sleep, her mental health, and her entire career to stay home and raise their child, and he used that very exhaustion to justify his betrayal. The heavy front door closed behind him, and Emily just collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor, completely surrounded by broken glass. By morning, the violent storm outside had finally passed. The heavy rain had stopped. This cold, gray sunlight filled the house, creating an eerie, traumatizing kind of calm. The kitchen floor had been swept, but the room still smelled faintly like spilled red wine. And as Emily sat there, staring blankly at the floorboards, she noticed something glinting in the light. Something that would unlock Daniel's entire sick, hidden life. It was a single, expensive-looking gold earring, dropped right near the trash can by that woman the night before. Emily recognized that earring immediately. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she opened her laptop on the kitchen island. A quick, desperate search brought up the profile. Vanessa Hale, 32 years old, marketing executive, Daniel's coworker. For months, Emily had felt this deep, unsettling discomfort about Vanessa. She had noticed her commenting on his posts, always just a little too friendly. But every single time Emily had brought it up or expressed discomfort, Daniel had aggressively gaslit her. He had laughed in her face, he called her paranoid, He swore on their daughter's life that there was nothing there. But right there, staring back at her on Vanessa's public profile, was a recent selfie, and she was wearing those exact same gold earrings. What makes this discovery so incredibly chilling is just how brazen the whole thing was. The digital trail Emily uncovered over the next hour was staggering. Just 3 weeks ago, Vanessa posted a photo at a fancy rooftop restaurant downtown, and right there, perfectly clear in the reflection of her wine glass, was Daniel. 2 months ago, Daniel claimed he had a mandatory, stressful business conference in Portland. Well, Vanessa's Instagram showed beautiful beach photos from Portland from that exact same weekend, the same boutique hotel, the same city. And as Emily pieced it all together, she realized that 3 months ago, her own mother had actually spotted Daniel downtown walking with another woman, but hadn't wanted to cause unnecessary panic for a new mom. This entire affair had been happening boldly, right in plain sight, while Emily was quite literally at home recovering from childbirth. Barely an hour later, Emily's mother arrived at the house. The second she walked through the front door, Emily completely broke down. She sat at the table sobbing, explaining the baby monitor, the blonde woman in her Chicago hoodie, the shattering glass, the horrific lies. Her mother just sat there and listened. And as she listened, her face slowly hardened with this intense protective fury. She leaned across the table and delivered the harsh, terrifying reality check that would instantly change the trajectory of Emily's entire life. She said, "Emily, you need a lawyer." Because this was no longer just a story about a broken heart. This was the opening scene of a looming, vicious legal war. But just hearing the word lawyer absolutely terrified Emily. She hadn't worked a full-time job since the day Sophie was born. And this brings us to a terrifying realization that so many people face: the financial trap. You see, Daniel handled all of their accounts, every single one. He controlled the mortgage, he controlled the savings, the investments, even Emily's personal everyday credit cards were completely tied to their shared banking funds. Her mother looked at her entirely horrified as the reality set in. Emily was completely, 100% financially dependent on a man who had just blown their family to pieces without a second thought. "That man planned this," her mother whispered. "He knew exactly what he was doing." Emily immediately tried to deny it. She shook her head. Daniel wouldn't do that. He was a liar, sure, but he wouldn't leave his own daughter with nothing, would he? And then her phone buzzed on the counter, a standard bank alert. Emily opened the notification, and the color completely vanished from her face. $482.17. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped the phone. Just the day before, she knew for a fact there had been over $24,000 in their joint checking account. Her entire safety net, her life savings, had simply vanished into thin air. She frantically opened the banking app fully, and there it was, the absolute, undeniable proof of malicious intent. It read, "Transfer complete, $23,500. It had been transferred out at 6:12 a.m., right around dawn, sent directly into another unknown private account entirely controlled by Daniel. Think about the sheer coldness of that. He didn't just cheat on his wife in their own home and insult her. He walked out the door, waited for the sun to come up, and systematically, quietly drained their entire checking account while she was still weeping on the kitchen floor. He intentionally left his wife and his 6-month-old baby entirely defenseless." Later that evening, Daniel actually had the nerve to return to the house. And he wasn't apologetic, he wasn't crying, he wasn't emotional at all. He was angry. He walked through the front door acting utterly devoid of any human remorse. When Emily screamed at him, confronting him about stealing their money, he just rolled his eyes, exhaled dramatically, and said, "It's my money, I earned most of it." He completely, ruthlessly justified his financial theft. He entirely ignored the glaring fact that Emily had willingly sacrificed her own career and income to stay home and raise the child they had created together. He stood in the hallway and coldly told Emily not to make this uglier than it needs to be. Uglier? Emily's heart just turned to stone. She looked at this stranger standing in her hallway. How could it possibly, in any universe, get any uglier than bringing another woman into her home, shattering their marriage, inflicting months of intense psychological gaslighting, and stealing her entire life savings? It really leaves one lingering, terrifying question, doesn't it? How much worse could the betrayal actually get? Well, the answer to that question is about to permanently shatter whatever was left of their reality. Daniel looked at his wife. He slowly rubbed his forehead, let out a long breath, and delivered the ultimate, irreversible confession. She's pregnant. The air completely left Emily's lungs. Her entire body went totally, terrifyingly numb. Daniel had gotten his mistress pregnant, while Emily was selflessly sitting at home, losing her sleep, losing her own identity, recovering from birth, and raising their tiny 6-month-old daughter. He was out there building an entirely new family in the shadows. He had replaced them before Emily even knew they were broken. Daniel scoffed, complaining out loud that he didn't come back to the house just to be attacked by her, and slowly, very slowly, Emily looked up at him. For the absolute first time since this entire nightmare began 24 hours earlier, her tears just stopped. They disappeared completely. Because in that exact moment, a powerful, fundamental psychological shift occurred inside her mind. The heartbreak faded away. The weeping, terrified victim on the kitchen floor was gone. And in her place, a cold, calculated, and highly dangerous rage began to take over every single cell in her body. You see, Daniel was entirely too arrogant, too utterly full of himself to realize what he had just done. He truly thought he had broken her. He thought he had left her powerless, penniless, and totally defeated. But by taking everything from her, he had actually just created the worst, most terrifyingly focused enemy of his entire life. She had absolutely nothing left to lose. Which leaves us with this final, chilling question. What exactly happens when an arrogant man severely underestimates the wife he destroyed? Well, you'll just have to wait and see what Emily does next.